So Steven Crowder is someone that exists so deeply within his own echo chamber that he comes to some pretty radical beliefs. And it's really crazy because his whole brand is built on, the whole change my mind. He goes into college campuses, into the thick of progressivism, and he battles out his ideas. That's his whole brand. I mean, it's a complete and utter lie. I mean, he has not had any meaningful debates. There's been a constant challenge from Sam Cedar for Steven Crowder to debate him, and he has just flat out refused, run away from it. He has not debated any prominent left wing figures that I know of. If anybody knows of any prominent debates between Steven Crowder and a left wing figure that isn't in college, please link me to that, because I don't think that he ever has. And even in some of these like change my mind segments that he does, where he like debates college kids, sometimes they get the best of him. Like, and he like will just like move to these like really like sleazy debate tactics to like try and like move out of it. Like, I remember there was this one where he was like debating this one kid about socialism, and like the kid was making some like really good I mean, this kid was like in high school and was like making some really good points, and like Steven Crowder just like but he used like a word like I forget what the word was, but like Steven Crowder like just hyper focused on like it was like an insulting word, and he just hyper focused on that and just wouldn't talk about any of the issues after that, and just got like really like acted like he was like offended about the word. He's like, well, I'm not offended, but I'm gonna just talk about how much this word offended me for the rest of the thing. A complete and utter joke. But because of this echo chamber, he has some pretty not good beliefs, and here it is talking about basically the concept of the Southern strategy and the idea that the Republicans and Democrats kind of switched in terms of what they believe in terms of racial stuff. And he gives some pretty misleading things in this video.
Talking about this when we were talking about the Civil War, and I wanted to touch on a little bit more, because some of the things that people believe they know also aren't so.
Sure.
For example, the Southern strategy.
Right.
Because they know Abraham Lincoln, Republican, that's the party that freed slaves, but at some point it switched. And you were kind of going, they always point to Strom Thurmond.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like you to kind of reiterate that point, because I think it's something that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, the thought that, well, the Republicans dominate the South today, but they're the old Democrats. They're the ones that were the racists, and they just got over into the Republican Party to get elected. My challenge to them is, all right, show me 10 examples of that, because they can always show me 2. I've never had anybody go more than 2 examples.
Strom
Thurmond and David Duke. And that's pretty much as far as it goes.
Well, and really, when you look at the thousands of people since, if we go back to the Civil War, who has switched, you probably come up with a couple hundred, but now we're talking about out of tens of thousands.
Right. And see, that's the deal. Because if we go back to the 60s in the South, when it was called the solid Democrat South, all right, every 2 years you have an election. I'm going to say there's at least 1,000. In Texas, there's about 10,000 people elected every 2 years, because we have 254 counties, about 27 people in each county.
Right.
Then you have local school boards, mayor, city council. So we're going to say, at a minimum, there's 1,000 people every 2-year election, and you've got 11 southern states, part of the Confederacy. So let's say that at that point in time, you have 11,000 people you can elect every 2 years, and we've been doing this 50 years, which is 25 elections. So now we're looking at 250,000 people we've elected in the South. Show me 100, show me 200 in that period of time that were Democrats that became Republicans that did not change their philosophy.
All right, and so the fact that he even he gives this long math thing about all this number of elected officials during this time, name 200 that switched, but they can't have switched based on ideology, and it's just really silly. But it just fundamentally misses the idea of what the Southern strategy was and what the switch refers to. When people say the parties didn't switch, they don't mean that politicians literally switched parties. That's not what the claim is. The fact that people like Strom Thurmond and David Duke switched parties does really highlight the fact that this switch happened, but it is not what the claim is. The claim is we are talking about a fairly short time horizon in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we're talking about 40 years that this switch happened. If we're talking long term, long wise, about 40 years that this switch happened. These are the same people living in the South. These are not different people. These are the same people. These are the same voters. They stopped voting for Democrats and started voting for Republicans. Now, is it that they all just magically stopped being racist and just stopped having these very racist beliefs that they held, and they just decided to go to Republicanism because they just so thoroughly believe in the power of the free market? Or is it that Republicans utilized what was known as the Southern strategy, where they started appealing to using a lot of like buzzwords like states' rights. States' rights is I was reading about this. It was popular. This concept of using state rights as a signal that, hey, we don't believe in like federal government involvement in stopping like segregation and like these different like redlining and things of that nature, like more racist policies. We don't want the federal government to step in, and so as a state, you guys can decide. And since the state is like overwhelmed by these people that have these racist beliefs, they're able to institute their policies. Nixon, Goldwater, these are the people that like basically were like kind of like the spearheads of this like Southern strategy. But the argument isn't that like politicians, the people like the elected Democrats, switch to Republican. That's not what we're saying. We are talking about the same voter bloc. We are talking about the South. We are talking about specific states. They stopped electing Democrats. They started electing Republicans. What's the argument for that? And we have some very prominent examples of people like Strom Thurmond. And I'll talk about it. They talk about Strom Thurmond. We'll go to that.
I've been with a lot of Democrats who switched to the Republican Party. One of the guys told me, he said, I've been in the Democrat Party my whole life. We've never said the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm a Republican media. I thought we should be saying that. And you guys opened with a prayer. I want to be a Republican. It was not about race. It was about different values. And that's often the case.
They often point to Strom Thurmond.
Sure.
What was the reason to him becoming a Republican? Was it because he was a racist and he became a racist?
Yeah, he was a segregationist and he was a racist. He had a change of heart, and a lot of guys did.
Which actually, even that change of heart, some people point to faith. Because he did have a conversion to Christianity at some point in his life, which was actually in that period of where he's switching parties, which even becomes interesting, because then when he switches and becomes a Republican, who does he hire to work on his staff?
Yeah, as a Republican, he went out and became the first Southern senator of any party to reach out and start hiring blacks into high positions in his staff. We're not talking secretarial, we're not talking answering phones, we're talking strategists on his staff. And he goes out and is the first Southern senator to do that. He did that as a Republican, not as a Democrat. A faith change. There was a lot of changes that happened in him.
Such a key detail in the context I think most people don't understand.
It is.
He became less racist.
Right.
And he had a change of heart.
Well, even as you phrase the question, right, when people...
All right, so when we're talking about Strom Thurmond, this is a guy incredibly, overtly racist for most of his career. Yes, towards the later part of his career, did he start hiring more black people to his staff and whatnot, and these different things? That is because the country had moved so far away from his backwards ideology that he just couldn't get away with the overt racism that he utilized early in his career. But that is not like why he was incredibly upset with Truman in '48 when Truman or I'm sorry, not him specifically, but just Democrats in the South were upset with Truman when Truman signed the it was a civil rights thing in '48, and that's what spawned the Dixiecrat Party, and that was these Southern Democrats who were more conservative, and they did not like where they felt like the Democratic Party was going. Strom Thurmond was a prominent member of this. And he just was disillusioned from the Democratic Party early on because of this racial issue. This was a big deal for him. Maybe there were other issues. They bring up his move to Christianity. I don't know how big of a role that played. I couldn't tell you on that. I really don't know much about his religious beliefs. But what I do know is that when he switched, it was to work on Goldwater's campaign. And Goldwater is known as a prominent person to use these, I guess dog whistles is what you would call them, to southern states to let them know that we want to let you guys keep utilizing these more racist policies that you're accustomed to, in the language of states' rights. I don't want to say that whenever people use states' rights, that's what they're talking about, because that's not true. There are a lot of libertarians, conservatives that believe in federalism. They believe in reserving power to the states. That is not what Nixon and Goldwater were trying to do, though, when they were signaling to these southern states. They were trying to let them know, hey, we're not going to interfere with you guys. Strom Thurmond, I mean, I think that this is just such... He had a change of heart. That's why he switched to the Republican Party. He was bad his whole time. But then he saw the light, and he went to go be a Republican. It's just crazy.
But the great switch that happened, it becomes significant a lot of times as conservatives or even as people of faith, as Christians, we get put on the defensive and we have to defend what somebody else accuses. Wait a second. If you're making a claim, the impetus is not on me to prove that you're wrong or I'm right. No, you have the impetus to prove what you're saying is right.
Right.
And this is where sometimes I think we're not as strategic as we should be and say, now, wait a second. You're saying that, okay, so who all switched? I don't have to prove they didn't switch. You have to prove they did switch.
Right.
And this is where they now have an insurmountable mountain because
They can't.
less than 10%, and I mean significantly less than 10% ever switched of the tens of thousands of people that were elected. It's not even close.
And so, let's stop that. All right, and so they just changed the goalpost of what is supposed to of what we should be like looking at to see whether or not the switch happened. It's not that the politicians switch. We have a very clear voting block. At most, we're talking like 2 generations of people. Like at most. They didn't just magically stop being racist and start voting Republican. They held a lot of these beliefs, but they felt like Republicans were the ones that were going to deliver on these things. It's not... This isn't a controversial thing, but Steven Crowder is just so down this rabbit hole that he is starting to believe these things. It's crazy. I don't know if he genuinely believes them. He might. He also seems like kind of a con artist sometimes. I'm not entirely sure on this one, but I think he's way off. So anyway, if you guys disagreed with anything I said in this video, please leave a comment down below. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that would watch what I said here, disagree. If I got anything wrong, please correct me. I'd love to be corrected. Everything I said, I will say, is based on what I've read. I am fully... If you've seen anything to the contrary, please let me know. I'd love to take a look at it. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great day.